Hey guys, Tom Barclay here at Tottenham's training ground. I feel like I've been up to Enfield and back pretty much every 12 hours at the moment after the last game against Man United last night, but not like complaining. It's great fun. Lots of enthralling comment from Ange, or great games to watch. Fascinating from a journalist point of view, and probably for you fans following it as well. I imagine it's been really, really interesting. So today was the press conference leading up to Liverpool on Sunday. Another massive game at home against the league leaders, and there was quite a lot that Ange talked about today. So let's get into it. I think top of it was from the open section rather than the embargo, and I might do a video later if I've got time on that section, was about the pundits, really, and how their scrutiny, their criticism of his style, whether it oversteps the mark or how he feels about it. And generally, when he was talking about Jamie Carragher and co, I was at the game last night, but following some of the comments about it, I mean, he seems to be pretty sceptical that Ange's style will work and how he must change at the back, or his style, particularly passing out from the back, and kind of stuff that a lot of people have been saying. So it's nothing particularly outlandish, really. It's pretty much what a lot of people feel about Ange's style, and obviously we know he won't change at all on that front. He said that he actually loves all the scrutiny and thinks it's a good thing. He says it's important actually for Tottenham to have that kind of focus on them rather than sort of being anonymous and treading water and not leaving any kind of impression on people. It does come back to the fact that he wants to be someone who builds something to last, something to be remembered, which is what we know all about. And he thinks it's healthy actually for him and his team to have that kind of scrutiny and focus on him and their style and his style. But he obviously won't change. Then he kind of hinted at a frustration with a bit of some of the comments being made that he feels are a bit headline grabbing from pundits. He wouldn't be very specific. He said he might come talk about that later, about another point about any specific comments he wasn't happy with or who they were from. But he did elaborate a little bit more about the kind of nature of some of these comments, referring effectively to his accent, or silly accent, obviously being an Aussie, being a rare, Australian managing in the Premier League. I don't remember any specifics on that, but maybe the internet will tell me, someone who has brought that up at some point, and maybe how he's viewed as not taking things seriously, and that he can also be dismissive of pundits as well in his approach. So he felt like that wasn't not something that he's particularly happy with, and he feels it's a bit dismissive. Which was quite interesting, from perhaps people that don't quite appreciate Postecoglou for what he is and what he brings to someone who definitely does seem to, and that's Arne Slot, fellow manager, who, remember, might well have been Tottenham manager had it gone through before Postecoglou took over. So it's an interesting sort of sliding doors moment there ahead of this game. Slot's been talking about Postecoglou in his own press conference, talking about how much he loves his style of play so much that he feels like he could actually be his agent, because he's such a sort of he just loves sort of talking about what Postecoglou brings to the game, and that's something that is reiterated by a lot of managers. Actually, they're very much a big fan of Ange. It's quite rare that you find a manager who isn't, for his attacking style of play. And Slot Ange sort of returned the favour. Made a joke about how his own agent, wouldn't be too happy with Slot's comments about that, but he obviously appreciates someone who's trying to make an impact like Slot himself is at Liverpool, and took those compliments in the way they should do, and was happy to hear them. On sort of more news related, obviously when Guglielmo Vicario got injured at first, we had the whole question marks whether Spurs were going to go and sign a free agent goalkeeper, which Ange pretty much quickly dismissed was a possibility, and then maybe whether they might sign someone in January, with him being out. Now Vicario seems like his timeline is potentially coming back in February, but we'll have to wait and see. So maybe not as bad as a really long injury, so that could affect their plans, albeit Forster's out of contract in the summer anyway. So I think, as I said at the time, I wouldn't be surprised if they accelerated sorting out a deal for a new keeper in January as a result, as a backup to Vicario. But he was asked the question effectively, despite the mistakes obviously Forster made in the game against Man United. His overall performances have been very good from a shot saving point of view, at least, and whether that had convinced him that there was no sort of need to dip into the transfer market for a new keeper in January. And he kind of hit back on that, not hit back, he just sort of suggested that what he had intimated back then a few weeks ago was that he would only be looking to sign a keeper if he suffered another injury to his goalkeepers. And I'm not quite sure I remember it that way. I remember it more because I asked the question about a free agent goalkeeper, him saying that if they lost someone else, then they might have to sign a free agent goalkeeper. But I don't remember him sort of ruling out signing a goalkeeper in January. So, but he sort of hinted that wouldn't be the case now. So if you can base it on those words, albeit I always feel like you take what manager says publicly when it comes to transfers with a pinch of salt. But if you do take them literally, it would suggest that they're not maybe looking to bring a new goalkeeper by them. I suppose if Vicario is back in the not too distant future, then that would suggest that be very plausible that they wouldn't bring in one then. On Forster himself, he was obviously asked about his performance and the mistakes he made, crazy mistakes really, from playing out the back against Man United again, as he was after the game, and he just said, look, you can't just sit here worrying about it. He was obviously disappointed, Forster that is, but we've got another game on Sunday. Lovely quote from him talking about how you've got to get your work shoes on, put your work gear on, or how people do that every day and get up and go to work. And it's the same for Forster. He's just got to get on with it. They don't really have any other option. And overall, he praised him as being outstanding since he's come in for Vicario, which I think, barring those mistakes last night, which I was stunned to see 2 in a row. Definitely, never seen that in a game. But I don't think many Spurs fans would have been shocked to see at least one error, because Spurs under Ange are just so wedded to playing out from the back. And we've seen in most games there's been one hairy moment from a pass from Forster, in my opinion, in most games. So probably something that was likely to happen at some point, albeit again, as I say, not two in the same game. But Ange on that point said that it was not going to stop him playing out from the back, which is what he said last night again, but reiterated that and actually said it would cause him more problems as a team than not if they suddenly changed approach on that front, because he is such a believer in what it can do for a team by playing out from the back, which he talked a bit about a few weeks ago. And if you ever see that Joe Hart clip about Ange basically opening up Joe's mind towards playing out from the back while at Celtic, that kind of will give you an idea of why it's so important to Postecoglou. He was asked again about Djed, Spence and Archie Gray, as he was last night, elaborated a bit more about them because they played so well. I guess the sort of new comment about Spence was he was kind of asked, have these last couple of games really has he proven a point, I suppose, with his performances that he can sort of be relied upon. And Ange said, it's only a couple of games, so you've got to take that with context. But what he's been really impressed with Spence is how he's not just sort of filled in and come in during an injury crisis. He's made a real impact, and that's definitely the case. Like Spence has come in both games. One at right back and one at left back, albeit in the Southampton game he obviously shifted to left back when Udogie got injured, and he's made a real impact. He obviously he's got assists in both games. Set up Maddison against Southampton with a lovely ball through, a really good ball through to Solanke as well for his goal against Man United, and he is making an impact. He's like a real option off the bench now as a result. So that is really encouraging. Great news for Djed Spence. He's had a real rough time, I suppose, during his time at Spurs. But I'm thinking back now to that standing ovation and walking around the pitch after the game and how well that went down with the Spurs fans. It must have been absolutely a great feeling from Spence's perspective, and Postecoglou seems really happy with him. On Archie Gray, I mean, to sum it up, he just basically called him outstanding and was very impressed with him. But it just cannot be overstated how impressive it is to have this 18-year-old come into the team, playing out of position. I'm guessing holding midfield is where we expect him to be long term, but he's obviously barely playing there. He's playing centre back right now, forming a pretty good relationship, to be honest, with Radu Dragusin, who again I thought was impressive last night and is starting to win me over, as I would say. Not that he will care about that, but from the comments that I've made before about not being quite convinced by him, I thought he was really good and really physical last night. Really added to Spurs on that point of view. And Gray, there was a lovely video that's clip of him after the game, which he seems to have done the rounds on social media, of him basically apologising to Forster afterwards about his pass. It looked like, I mean, obviously can't hear it, but based on the sort of lip reading, it looks like he was saying sorry for the pass that led to Forster's second mistake, I would guess, which, personally, I don't think he's got anything to apologise for. It's obviously Forster's poor touch and should have cleared it. But it shows you the kind of maturity and responsibility that Gray is taking from his performances at the moment at such a young age. This is a player who's looking very exciting, looking like a real shrewd signing long term for Spurs. It's funny, isn't it? You go from one week when it's not going well, and the 100 million spent on youngsters is almost used as a stick to beat Spurs with for not being more ambitious and signing ready-made players. And then when it is going well, you think, wow, they've set themselves up for the future. I mean, I guess the narrative really should be somewhere in the middle. I guess with young players, as ever, you're going to get inconsistent form, and they're going through an injury crisis when it's not going well with the way they play. They're always, liable to have issues at times. But when it is going well, like it did last night against Man United, it is easy to see why Spurs fans could be very excited about the future, particularly with Archie Gray. On that front, about performances, he was asked a bit about it's a good question by Charlie Eccleshare from The Athletic, who was taking a bit of a week off from his tennis to come back here, and he was asked a bit about how scrutiny-wise and criticism of football, does it feel a bit too serious these days compared to what it once was, where it was more about the passion for the game, whereas now it so sort of delves into analytics and statistics, and I know people love that, and there's a lot of benefit that can be sort of gleaned from that, but sometimes it feels a bit not dehumanizing, but takes the humanity or takes the passion away sometimes a little bit, I would argue. And he just said, he sort of agreed to a certain extent, Postecoglou, on that point, and made that point about the sort of obsession with statistics in the modern day analysis of football, and how, I guess, with them, fans and pundits and everyone around football is kind of searching for perfection and like perfect performance. And if you could just tweak these one or two things, they're suddenly Spurs would be 100%, as if that's ever possible, which is clearly not. And how he's basically saying, look, it isn't possible to do that. You can obviously strive for more, always strive for more, but to enjoy it a bit more along the way. Although I do wonder, much of the reaction I've had from Spurs fans off the back of last night's game is my heart rate is just suddenly started to come down now after that. Like, how enjoyable is it from a Spurs fan point of view? I'm a neutral. I'm enjoying it. I've got my own sort of stresses of writing a match report, and in a scenario like that, which I can explain another day, like the stress of that when you think one thing's going one way and then suddenly it changes and you have to do a rewrite. But from a fan's point of view, you must be having kittens a lot of the time. So how enjoyable it is, I don't know. Maybe it's enjoyable on the rewatch. Who knows? Other lines. Interesting. I've totally missed this, but Sarr and Maddison are now suspended for the semi-final first leg as a result of yellow cards, which he was annoyed by. He didn't think they deserved them anyway. Weird twist, I suppose. I didn't. My mistake, I suppose, as a journalist, not realising A, that happened, and B, that this has been limited just to the Carabao Cup. So that is a blow. I mean, by the time that game comes around in early January against Liverpool, they're not going to have too many sort of clear-ups of injuries. So that will be a bit of a blow, to be fair. So he was frustrated by that. He was asked a bit about Vicario's recovery, who because he was on the pitch yesterday, and he says he's always pushing to be back, but he's still a bit away. Mikey Moore was interesting, because the other day he said he was basically, him and Ben Davies were the next cabs off the rank in terms of returning players, and that he was back in training. But he said, or maybe close to training if I'm misremembering it, but he said he's not been training and he still needs a few weeks of training with the team to get back to being fit to start or fit to play. So perhaps he's a bit further away than we thought. It was a bit of a shame. You do think, like, during this period, Mikey Moore would have had so many games, a bit like Archie Gray, or at least been involved in so many games. So real shame for him to have this virus. But a few weeks away still, Mikey Moore. Werner, he hopes, is going to be fit. He obviously got sick before the game against United, but they've obviously got a little while, 48 hours to the Liverpool game at this point, so he's hoping they'll be fit. Same with the doggy, who he hinted that wouldn't play in both games after coming off with soreness against Southampton, so I think it was always likely that he would be involved against Liverpool rather than Man United. And then finally he was asked about his boyhood fandom of Liverpool and how it influenced him, because it's well known that Ange grew up as a Liverpool fan back in Australia, and he'd watch and read anything he could get his hands on, which wasn't very much, to be fair, over there at that time, and sort of really grew to love that Liverpool side. More specifically on that, he said he was very influenced by the 70s and early 80s side that was all about pass and move, and specifically he used to read a lot about the five-a-sides they did in training, which sort of equates a bit more to a rondo these days. Rondo being where you often see them before the game, where you get a couple of players inside a circle of other players, who the other players are trying to pass the ball to each other without losing it to the players inside. It's something you'll see ahead of every game these days, as the players are warming up, and just how that influenced him, and I guess his keeping the ball on the floor, short passages of play, in terms of passing and attacking football, and how he was influenced by it, the kind of football his dad loves, which is he's often referenced before as being a big influence on his whole approach. Liverpool at home. I was just thinking about this. I feel like every video I've done this season, pretty much, or of late, has been, oh, this is a massive game. This is a massive game. This is a big referendum on Ange's sort of approach, and where's he going to fit after it? Maybe this one isn't. Maybe this isn't. Because they've had a really good week so far, scored 9 goals in 2 games. They've beaten Man United in the League Cup to get through to the semi-finals, got through Southampton, which was a banana skin, albeit it proved to be not one at all in the end. But it definitely would have been if it had gone. It could have been if Southampton had been, if they hadn't played like they did, both Spurs and Southampton. And now you're facing Liverpool. Yes, you're at home, and yes, the league position is the way it is: 7 wins, 7 defeats, plus 17 goal difference, which is just mad when you think about it. I've never thought anything like that from a team, to be like that, to have that kind of goal difference when they've won as many games as they've lost. But Liverpool top of the league and been brilliant under Arne Slot. So I think most fans will go into this expecting a Liverpool win, hoping that Spurs can do it, and they know that they've got it in their locker. But if Liverpool win, I don't think it's going to be a massive disgrace from Ange Postecoglou's point of view, and maybe I wouldn't have thought there would be much noise after it if that is to be the case. So maybe for the first time in ages, not a massive game, but a massive opportunity, I suppose, from Spurs' point of view. And if they can go and win here, wow, that would be a game changer. Because, win at Man United earlier this season, well, Ten Hag's on his last legs at United. His team are terrible. Doesn't mean much, apparently, is the way it was rephrased categorised after it, which is obviously not the case. Still you win 3-0 at Old Trafford. It's a great result, whatever's going on at Man United. You win 4-0 at Man City. Even after that, which was an absolute landmark victory and one of their best ever in the Premier League, people were talking about how Guardiola's going through this awful time, which we've never seen before. So it was caveated as well. Surely, if you go and beat Liverpool at this stage, that won't be the case, because Arne Slot, the best team in Europe. Arne Slot's side, the best team in Europe. He's done an unbelievable job since taking over from Klopp. I think most people were expecting a similar sort of vibe to the David Moyes post Alex Ferguson, in terms of taking over from a legend. All right, Liverpool had a team that was on the up rather than a team that was in decline like Man United at the time. But you cannot overstate what a job Slot has done at Liverpool. And so if Spurs can go and win that game, then wow, that would be some statement and a real vindication of Postecoglou's approach. As he said, it's unlikely to be 0-0. You wouldn't expect it. So I'm expecting and excited for another thriller, another exhilarating game of football. Just as regarding the lineup, obviously Forster continues in goal. Porro, this is interesting, isn't it? Spencer's played so well, hasn't he, in the last couple of games? But you would probably guess it'd be Porro and a doggy starting. And, Spence probably has got a bit of fatigue, you would have thought, generally, just from the last few games. Not that Ange's mentioned that, but having not played much, to play 2 games in such a quick turnaround. But the good thing about him is, even if he doesn't start, he suddenly seems like a real attacking option from fullback off the bench. So, I would guess Porro and a doggy. Gray and Dragusin continue. Ben Davies not quite ready yet, nor are Van der Ven or Romero. And then I would have thought he might stick with the rest of the team. I think Basuma, don't think you bring Bergvall in for this one as well as he played at Southampton. Maddison and Sarr. And then I'd probably stick with Kulusevski on the right, Solanke and Son. But I guess there's a question mark over where they're at sort of physically after so many games. Maybe he might look to bring Johnson back in, but I would not be surprised if that was the team. And looking at that team, barring the centre-backs, obviously, that's starting to feel like his best side. Even though I prefer Kulusevski in the middle. When Maddison's playing like this and Kulusevski is playing like he is at the moment, he's actually playing pretty well out wide right. That's perhaps his most well-balanced side, albeit, you know, it's all about the moments they're at in a particular season. But that looks a good side to give Liverpool problems, which they will. And I imagine there'll be lots of goals. And I can't wait, to be honest. Anyway, do a video afterwards. See you guys.